You know, last week we began this short sermon series as we prepared ourselves to go see the movie I Still Believe by addressing how one should deal with seemingly unanswered prayers. We discussed the three practical ways when we're confused or frustrated or angry with God about how He's responding or not responding to our prayers. When we find ourselves in those situations, we wait, we walk with God, and we worship with God. So today we're going to take it a step further. We're going to talk about our faith. You see, it takes a strong faith in order to wait. It takes a strong faith in order to walk with God, and it certainly takes a strong faith to worship God. The author of Hebrews reminds us of that this morning in our lesson. Without faith, it's impossible to please God, is what the author wrote. Because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists, and He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. You know, Martin Luther King had an interesting take on faith. Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. And finally, Jesus shared this in John. He said, I've told you these things, so that in me you may have peace. And in this world you will have trouble. You know, it sounds a lot like a promise, doesn't it? In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Take heart, have faith. Today we're going to look at three powerful examples of faith. Two of them come from the New Testament, and one comes from a courageous missionary named Andrew. But before we jump into these stories, I want to share with you again the chorus from Jeremy Camp's song, Walk by Faith. Well, I will walk by faith, even when I cannot see, because this broken road prepares your will for me. So here's the key. There are some here who today will hear these next stories, and I pray that you're going to be encouraged by them. The broken road that you're currently traveling may be difficult, but I assure you God has a plan and God has a purpose for each one of us. And even if you cannot see or understand what is happening, I want you to know that God is faithful and God is in control. And then there are others who will hear these stories today and might be reminded of seasons that God has faithfully delivered you through. And finally, there are those here today who will sooner or later enter a season that is going to test your faith. I can only hope that the stories today will help you through any frustration, anger, or confusion that may help you choose to walk by faith. But before we get into the three stories, I'd like to take a moment and offer a prayer. Offer a prayer that God would open us up to receive the hope and the encouragement that the Lord has for us today in this word. So please, let's pray together. Oh Lord, speak in this place. In our minds, in our hearts, speak by the words of my mouth and in the thoughts we form. Speak, O Lord, we, your servants, are listening. Amen. So to begin last week's gospel lesson, we looked at the story of Jairus, the synagogue leader who had the sick daughter, and his interaction with Jesus. He wanted Jesus to come with him and heal his sick daughter. We learned that Jairus is in this unique situation, and he had to really keep walking with Jesus for quite some time before receiving an answer to his request. So today, I want to look at the woman who interrupted Jesus and Jairus. Let's look at that woman who delayed Jesus from going to Jairus' home to heal the daughter. Let's pick up last Sunday's gospel lesson with this. Woman was there. She had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, spent all she had, and instead of getting better, she grew worse. This is in and of itself an incredibly difficult position to be in. She's sick, she's seeing doctors, and she's getting nowhere. To add insult to injury, she spent all of her money. After 12 long years, she has no options left. So what we learn from this passage in Mark 5 is that her issue of bleeding would have made her ceremonially unclean, according to Levitical law. It's in chapter 15 of Leviticus. And being unclean meant that she was excluded from all forms of worship. She could never go to the synagogue, never go to the temple. Every chair or bed she sat on or slept in would be unclean. And anyone who touched them would be unclean. And so she had absolutely no social life, no friends, no close family members. This situation may sound gross and even confusing, but it's important information to really understand the pain and the loneliness that this woman was suffering. For 12 years, she was unable to worship with her community. For 12 years, she was unable to share her home with family or friends. For 12 years, she was unable to find relief for the pain that racked her body. It is from that desperate place that this unbelievable act of faith and correspondingly tremendous miracle occurred. For Mark goes on to say, when she heard about Jesus, when she just heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd. What courage would that have taken? She's not able to be anywhere where other people are. She was ostracized by society. But this was important enough to her because she had faith in Jesus Christ. And I'm going to take whatever punishment people want to give me for walking among them because I want to touch his clothes. Because I have faith, I will be healed. And immediately, Mark says, her bleeding stopped. And she felt that in her body that she was freed from her suffering. So the woman experienced this immediate miracle as the healing power of Christ flowed into her. She was instantly restored to fellowship. She was restored to community. She was restored to physical health because of this bold act of faith in Jesus. And bold faith is exactly how I would describe the subject of our next story as well. This is the subject of a modern-day Christian missionary. This guy's name is Andrew. And his mission was, I'm smuggling Bibles into communist countries. He spent his entire life doing that. And as you might imagine, some were successful, most were not. One particular instance, he cites, he was taking a carload of Bibles into Romania. And his only hope really were that the border guards would just wave him on through. Because if they inspected his car, all they were going to find was boxes of Bibles strewn everywhere. Well, when Andrew got into the line, he noticed that the lead car up in the front, not only had the guards gotten the people out of the car, but they started stripping it down. They took the seats out. They took the hubcaps off, part of the engine off, inspecting for contraband. So Andrew knew he was in a lot of trouble. There's no way to get out of the line now that he's in it. So he said to himself, Dear Lord, what am I going to do? And as he prayed, a bold idea came to him. He said, I know no amount of cleverness is going to get me out of this situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack some Bibles and I'm going to strew them around my car. I'm going to make them very visible. Because then, you see, if I get through here, it's all entirely because God got me through. It's nothing I would have done. So Andrew proceeded ahead. His car finally gets up to the checkpoint. He gives the guard his passport. He starts to undo the door so he could get out. The guard had his knee against the door and wouldn't let him out. He took a look at his passport. He gave it back to Andrew and sent him on his way. Andrew said, I couldn't have been there more than 30 seconds. And he said, I wasn't sure. He said, I thought maybe he just wanted me to pull ahead and pull over, and so he would get everything out of my car. But he said, I looked in the rearview mirror, and he had already stopped the next car, and he was having the guy get out. So said, clearly, God wanted those Bibles into the hands of the Christians in Romania. By all measure, that was a gigantic act of faith in the face of near certain disaster. But you know, it is the striking boldness of these first two stories that should remind us that faith often precipitates a step into the unknown. And our last story highlights the persistence of one who has nothing to gain but everything to lose. In our gospel lesson for today, Luke 18, starting at verse 1. It's on page 731 if you'd like to follow along as I read through our gospel in the chair Bible. Luke 18, starting at verse 1. This is a very familiar story, and so I'm going to jump right in. Now, Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God or cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with this plea: grant me justice against my adversary. For some time he refused, but finally he said this: even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't eventually come and attack me. And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? You and I, who cry out to him day and night. Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice. Your prayers will be answered, every one of them, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? Now let me ask you this. Isn't that the very question that we're still wrestling with today? When Jesus comes again, is he going to find faith on this earth? Is he going to find faith in our community? Is he going to find faith in our church? Is he going to find faith in you and me? I think you will agree with me when I conclude that life is quite a journey. A journey that certainly takes strength and encouragement and most of all, faith. I think that's at least in part why the writer of Hebrews said this in our lesson this morning. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Not giving up meeting together as some in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. All the more as you see that second coming of Christ approaching. Now, I hope these stories that I shared with you today are an encouragement to you. Whether you're in the middle of a difficult season, on the other side of one, or possibly heading for one. It is our collective testimony of God's faithfulness that helps spur each other on. I suspect most of us actually thought about these stories and many more when we witnessed the story, the true life story of Jeremy Camp yesterday in the movie I Still Believe. I encourage you always to remember that one line from the song, I Still Believe. You see, it was in the midst of Jeremy Camp's own frustration, his own confusion, and his own anger with God at a seemingly unanswered prayer in his life that he wrote this: even when I don't see, I still believe. And that's what I want to leave you with today. In the midst of life's storms, when things aren't making sense to you anymore, and you don't know how to respond to the way that God is either responding or not responding to you, remember, even when I don't see, I still believe. So will you wait on him? Will you walk with him? Will you worship him? Will you step out in faith and say, yes, Lord, even when I don't see, I will believe. I truly pray so. Amen.